A caravan of 450 merchants crosses the desert under the banner of Genghis Khan. They carry silk, gold, and a personal letter from the most feared conqueror on the planet. The letter is not a declaration of war, it's an offer of trade. And the man who receives it throws the whole thing in the fire. What happens next is not a battle, it's an erasure. Within 4 years, one of the wealthiest, most sophisticated empires in the medieval world simply ceases to exist. Not weakened, not occupied, gone. And the single decision that caused it wasn't made by Genghis Khan. It was made by a paranoid second-tier governor who didn't bother to read the room. Here's what nobody tells you about the Mongol conquests. Genghis Khan's preferred opening move was not violence, it was commerce. The Mongol Empire had no merchant class of its own, so it actively needed trade partners. When Khan sent that 1218 caravan to the Khwarazmian Empire, a Persian-speaking Islamic sultanate that stretched from modern Iran through Central Asia and into Afghanistan, he wasn't posturing. He wanted the Silk Road open. The letter accompanying the caravan described the Khwarazmian Shah Muhammad II as his most treasured neighbor. By any diplomatic standard of the era, this was an invitation, not an ultimatum. The caravan arrived at the border city of Otrar, governed by a man named Inalchuk, also known by his title Genghis Khan. And here is where the catastrophe begins, not with armies, but with greed and a spectacular failure of nerve. Inalchuk looked at 450 merchants, their loaded camels, and their letters of safe passage, and he decided they were spies. Some historians suggest he was simply after the cargo. Others think he genuinely believed the caravan was a reconnaissance mission dressed up as a trade delegation. Either way, he sent word to Shah Muhammad, and Muhammad, instead of correcting the mistake, authorized what Inalchuk wanted. Every merchant in the caravan was executed. The goods were seized. And then, as if to make absolutely certain there was no walking this back, when Genghis Khan sent a second diplomatic mission demanding an explanation, a formal envoy of ambassadors, Inalchuk executed those men too. One ambassador was beheaded. The others were sent back with their beards shaved off, a deliberate, public humiliation. Genghis Khan reportedly went alone into the hills and prayed for 3 days. When he came back down, the Mongol Empire mobilized. Now understand what the Khwarazmian Empire actually was in this moment. Shah Muhammad hadn't inherited a weak state. He presided over a domain that had been expanding for roughly 4 centuries under various forms, covering some of the most productive agricultural land and the most trafficked trade routes in the medieval world. His army numbered somewhere between 300,000 and 400,000 soldiers. His cities, Samarkand, Bukhara, Urgench, were among the largest and most cultured on the planet. Bukhara alone was renowned across the Islamic world as a center of scholarship, mathematics, and medicine. This was not a fragile empire on the edge of collapse. This was a civilization at something close to its peak. Genghis Khan brought roughly 100,000 to 150,000 soldiers. On paper, the math favors Muhammad, but the Mongols didn't fight like anyone else, and Muhammad had made a decision that would unravel his entire military strategy before a single battle started. Instead of concentrating his enormous army, he distributed his forces across his fortified cities, convinced that the walls would hold. This was the tactical error that sealed everything. The Mongols didn't need to beat a unified army. They got to fight a fragmented one, city by city, fortress by fortress, and they were extraordinarily good at that kind of war. Genghis Khan split his forces into multiple columns and attacked from directions the Khwarazmians hadn't anticipated, including a strike through terrain considered nearly impassable. The psychological campaign was as lethal as the military one. Cities that surrendered quickly were sometimes spared. Cities that resisted were made into examples that the next city down the road would hear about before the Mongols even arrived. Bukhara fell in 1220. Samarkand fell weeks later. Muhammad fled west, chased by a Mongol detachment across his own disintegrating empire, and died on an island in the Caspian Sea, reportedly without a shroud to bury him in. Inalchuq, the man who started all of this, held out inside Otrar for 5 months. When the city finally fell, the histories record that the Mongols executed him by pouring molten silver into his eyes and ears. Whether or not that detail is precisely accurate, the fact that it circulated widely enough to be recorded says something about how history remembered his choice. The deeper lesson buried in all of this isn't really about Mongol military genius, though that's real. It's about how civilizations die from the inside out. The Khwarazmian Empire didn't fall because it was weak. It fell because one man with local authority made a unilateral decision, and the man above him lacked either the wisdom or the courage to reverse it. Inalchuq had the power to torch a diplomatic relationship without fully understanding what he was touching. Muhammad had the power to stop it and chose not to. 2 decisions, made in isolation, handed the most formidable military force of the medieval era the justification it needed. The cities those decisions destroyed took centuries to recover. Some never fully did. The population losses across the region from the Mongol campaigns that followed are still debated by historians, but estimates routinely reach into the millions. All of it traceable back to one border governor, one seized caravan, and one letter that never got a real reply. The sources and further reading on the Khwarazmian conquest are linked in the description.